So you have a business, you have like a company name, you've got a logo, you've got something that you're running your business under. You've told all your family and friends that you have this business. You are filing taxes as if you have a business. But here's the problem. Some of you really don't have a business. No, what you have is a job disguised as a business. Hey, badass business owners, my name is Tammy and I'm here to help you grow your business, but more importantly, grow those profits. And I think it's important that we have a serious dialogue as to where you are in your business. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not here to tick you off. You really do own a business. But here's the problem. For some of you, that business owns you, which means you really have a job. And if your business cannot run without you, it's a job. Now, some of you have just started your business and you haven't grown it enough. So of course, it's going to be more of a job. For some of you, you've been in business for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, and you're still dependent upon you in your business. And therefore, it is still a job. Sometimes that is by design. You don't want to have employees. You don't want to have other people helping you out. You want to be able to close down the business so you can go do your vacations or do whatever. That's different. That's something by choice. However, for some of you, it just feels like every single day is a grind. You have to get up, go to work, and it feels like work. You know, we say I've got to go to work, as opposed to I'm off to run my business. It's even if you run a business, it's still work. So don't get too hung up on that particular language. But really what I want to do is I want to kind of step back and take a look at this. What does it mean to own a business, and what is ultimately the goal of the business? Now, for some people, you've worked for other people and you just didn't want to work for someone else. You just wanted to be able to build a business for you to be able to take care of your bills, to have a life and everything else, in which case it might be a job. You might be the only person, like we mentioned earlier, that's ever going to be in that business, in which case it's a business that, sometimes is it still running behind the scenes without you? I think that's another way to look at it is sometimes we've set up our SEO, we've set up our website, we've set up our advertising to where the business will at least continue to go even if we are not working in the moment, or if we decide to take a vacation. We still have some processes in place and some things in place that will keep the business humming along, will keep that business moving. And for some people, if we're not doing every single thing in that business comes to a screeching halt. And like I mentioned, we do that a lot in the beginning, because in the beginning of your business, you wear a lot of hats. Nothing happens without you. But as your business grows and matures, there should be some things that you're able to either put processes in place so that way they do it without you, or you're going to be able to bring in some people. You might have an office person who helps you out. You might have a VA assistant, a virtual assistant, whether that's someone here in the States, or some people are real happy with folks that are abroad due to the costs of it. I'm not here to pass judgment about where they are. I'm just making some facts that are out there. And for other people, you've brought on someone to help you out, somebody that you can trust, that if you were to take a day off or be gone for several days, they could continue to run that business for you. It might be one person, you might have a shift leader, you might have a crew leader, you might have whatever the case may be, but somebody can keep that business moving along as well. Now, most people fall somewhere in between. They're not completely unattached from the business, although there are people that work maybe 5 hours a week in their business because they've just got everything in place. They just kind of dip in, check on things, make sure they're rolling along, and they just love being sole business owner. They're no longer doing the work. They're no longer needed to do a lot of the stuff other than the high level visionary stuff. And if that's your goal and that's where you're aiming for, there's a lot of steps you need to do in between to get there. Some of you are probably already there. You're still, you've found this happy place to where the business can run without you. And that's great. And there's some people that I know that are exactly like that. Now, for most of you, you're still grinding. You're still trying to figure it out. But I just want to make sure that you really know where you're at in this, because really what you're doing is you're building a business, right? You're building a business that doesn't need you every single moment of every single day. So it kind of you might be in more closer to that job stage than you are to that building that business. But where some people need to really be shaken and heard at this moment are people who think they're building a business, but that business just isn't growing. They're just not taking any of the steps to work on the business, quote unquote, because what they're doing is they're so busy being in the business, doing the actual work. And when you're in the business and that's all you're doing and you're not working on your business, you 100% have a job. For many of you, you're somewhere in between. You've got to make sure that you are taking the time to work on the business. Now, working on the business could be a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just sitting down and making sure that you have the right pricing policy, that your prices are correct and that you're hitting the target that you want. It could be that you're working on your processes and making sure that the processes are in place to make your job easier and to make it more efficient, even if you're not having to do it all the time. Working on your businesses, looking at your bookkeeping, and is your bookkeeping up to date? Because ultimately you need to be looking at your business numbers. You're working on your business when you're looking at those business numbers and you're looking for what happened last month, what's happened the coming month, what's going to happen in the next 3 months. You're putting together a plan to execute over the next 3 to 6 months and where you want to be next year and having a plan for it and stuff like that. But ultimately, those with just a job are just doing the doing. You know what? They're getting the sale, they're turning around, and they're just going out and executing, right? I take a client, I go do their work for them, I come back, I bill them, I repeat, rinse, repeat. Every single day looks the same. And they're never finding that time, they're never carving out that time to be able to work to continue to grow that business to where ultimately it's a business owner. Now, let me talk about people who, for example, when they go to sell their business, right? Here's a good example. When you want to sell your business, most people aren't looking to buy a job. They don't want to necessarily take your business and just start running it and just jump right in and being the doer all the time. Now, some people want to do that because they want to get their feet wet. But most people, when they're seriously looking for that top dollar to be able to purchase a business, what the first thing they're going to look at is what's it going to cost them to replace you in the business. So if I'm going to buy your business, but I don't want to be doing all the labor part of it, I'm going to ask myself, do I have to pay $40,000, $50,000, $70,000 to hire somebody to do what it is that you do? Because if I have to replace you in that business, that's a whole job that needs to be replaced. Your business isn't as valuable to me unless I'm going to step in and do that work for you. So when people are looking at purchasing a business, one of the questions they're looking at is, I don't want to do their job. Especially like, for example, if somebody's trying to expand it, right? Let's say they have a business similar to yours and they want to buy your business. Well, they're already doing all the work that they're doing in their business. They don't want to pick up the 40, 50, 60 hours a week that you're doing in your business. So they know they have to replace you, that body in that business. Otherwise, your business doesn't have any value to them. And so they're going to look at, if you're making $40,000 a year, but I have to pay $40,000 to replace you in that business, that business really does not have any value to me, because it's, you were the business, you were the employee of the business, and the only reason that business had could call itself a business, right? Because you were the sole and only employee in that. Hopefully some of this is making sense to you. I mean, I think the real thing that I want you to do is I want you to constantly be asking yourself, where am I in my business? Am I growing? You know what? Am I doing less and less every single day in the business? Or am I still, the grinder, the main person? My business will fall apart if something was to happen to me. If all of a sudden you were told you couldn't do anything in your business for 7 days, what would happen? Do you have processes in place where the business would continue to go? For example, like I said earlier, advertising, SEO, your Google stuff, things like that. Is it at least going to keep the business going? Do you have a scheduling system where people can go online and kind of schedule or book appointments, things like that? That lets the business at least keep going, because you could at least put in there that nothing could happen in that business during that certain time. Are you becoming more efficient to where you can work on the business, growing the business? Have you looked at the fact that maybe I do need to bring someone aboard, even if it's going to cost me $20,000 a year? When that's spread out, it's not that bad, but somebody who could help me with my scheduling and with some of the tasks behind the scenes. Am I working on $15, $20 an hour tasks in my business where I could hire somebody to do those things. All those things are calculated decisions that a business owner is going to make where an employee wouldn't make that. So that's another way to look at it is, are the decisions you're making on a regular basis, are they employee type decisions or are they business owner type decisions? Because the business owner is going to do more than just the doing. They're going to constantly be thinking about, how do I grow my business? How do I make my business bigger, better, more profitable? I'm going to look at my sales. I'm going to look at my pricing. I'm going to look at, the trends in my business. That's what the business owner is doing. Okay. So if you're not spending a big chunk of your time looking at those kinds of things, and all you're doing is spending all of your time on the doing, once again, you have a job. You're not really thinking like a business owner. You just happen to own a business, because when you identify, for example, do you identify, I'm an electrician, I'm a dog groomer, I'm a whatever, or are you identifying as, I own a dog grooming business, I own an electrician business, an electrical business? Do I own whatever type of business it is that you own? Are you identifying as that person who's trying to grow their business, or are you identifying as the employee? So words could be one of the first places for you to start. When you introduce yourself to people, how do you introduce yourself? So you want to make sure that you identify as the business owner. There's something about identifying as that business owner that's going to give you more power, and it's going to help you make better decisions day to day, as opposed to identifying as the technician who happens to do the business that you're doing. Okay. So that's important for you to know, because when someone hears that you're a dog groomer or an electrician or whatever, they're going to think and assume that you work for somebody else, right? This just happens to be what it is that you do. And you want to be identified as the business owner. You're busting your butt doing this to build this great thing. Make sure you identify as that business owner. It's going to make a big difference inside of how you react to things and the things that you do on a regular basis. All right. So we've had some pretty good dialogue here today when it comes to, are you a job? Do you own a job or do you own a business? I want you to ask yourself, which one do you have? Which way do you identify as, and what can you do today to really make sure that you're identifying as the business owner? Not just in how you communicate yourself to other people, but what it is that you work on every single day in your business. Because if you're working on how to grow your business, I promise you might be doing a lot of technician stuff and you might be doing the main person in your business, but you're thinking like a business owner. Because if the majority of your day is, how do I make my business better? How do I get better? Then I promise you are a business owner, even if you are working by yourself. And I think that's important to do. But if the majority of your day is spent on just getting sales and executing those sales, that's not really thinking like a business owner, okay? That's production line. That's an employee mentality and whatnot. So I just want to make sure you have that right mentality. It's important that you really know who it is that you identify with. And with that, I'm going to get out of here, and I will talk to you next time. Bye for now.